Despite the difficulties today, Democratic voting activist Stacey Abrams says it's important for voters to remember that they have power.
There's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, and that means everyone had the same idea, which is let's show up today to cast our ballots. We just have to recognize that there are a lot of us here, and it may take a little extra time. We hope it won't take as long as it's taken today, but we should not be discouraged. We should not be distracted. Let's be determined and get this done. But more than anything, voters should be determined to be heard regardless of what they see, regardless of what they hear. Keep your eye on the prize and get your vote cast.
There are 3 weeks of early voting. Abrams says she's been talking to county election leaders and feels everyone is on the same page, wanting to fix issues immediately to make this process as easy as possible.